April 18th. I found out what a Rorschach is. It's the test with the ink blots, the one I took before the operation. As soon as I saw what it was, I got frightened. I knew Bert was going to ask me to find the pictures, and I knew I wouldn't be able to. I was thinking, if only there was some way of knowing what kind of pictures were hidden there. Maybe there weren't any pictures at all. Maybe it was just a trick to see if I was dumb enough to look for something that wasn't there. Just thinking about it made me sore at him. "All right, Charlie," he said. "You've seen these cards before, remember?" Of course I remember. The way I said it, he knew I was angry, and he looked up at me, surprised. "Anything wrong, Charlie?" "No, nothing's wrong. Those ink blots upset me." He smiled and shook his head. "Nothing to be upset about. This is just one of the standard personality tests. Now, I want you to look at this card. What might this be? What do you see on this card? People see all sorts of things in these ink blots. Tell me what it might be for you, what it makes you think of." I was shocked. I stared at the card, and then at him. That wasn't what I had expected him to say at all. "You mean there are no pictures hidden in those ink blots?" Bert frowned and took off his glasses. "What?" "Pictures. Hidden in the ink blots. Last time you told me that everyone could see them and you wanted me to find them too." "No, Charlie, I couldn't have said that." "What do you mean?" I shouted at him. Being so afraid of the ink blots had made me angry at myself and at Bert, too. "That's what you said to me. Just because you're smart enough to go to college doesn't mean you have to make fun of me. I'm sick and tired of everybody laughing at me." I don't recall ever being so angry before. I don't think it was at Bert himself, but suddenly everything exploded. I tossed the Rorschach cards on the table and walked out. Professor Niemer was passing by in the hall, and when I rushed past him without saying hello, he knew something was wrong. He and Bert caught up with me as I was about to go down in the elevator. "Charlie," said Niemer, grabbing my arm. "Wait a minute. What is this all about?" I shook free and nodded at Bert. "I'm sick and tired of people making fun of me, that's all. Maybe before I didn't know any better, but now I do, and I don't like it." "Nobody's making fun of you here, Charlie," said Niemer. "What about the ink blots? Last time Bert told me there were pictures in the ink that everyone could see, and I—" "Look, Charlie, would you like to hear the exact words Bert said to you and your answers as well? We have a tape recording of that testing session. We can replay it and let you hear exactly what was said." I went back with them to the psych office with mixed feelings. I was sure they had made fun of me and tricked me when I was too ignorant to know better. My anger was an exciting feeling, and I didn't give it up easily. I was ready to fight. As Niemer went to the files to get the tape, Bert explained, "Last time I used almost the exact words I used today. It's a requirement of these tests that the procedure be the same each time it's administered." "I'll believe that when I hear it." A look passed between them. I felt the blood rush to my face again. They were laughing at me. But then I realized what I had just said, and hearing myself, I understood the reason for the look. They weren't laughing. They knew what was happening to me. I had reached a new level, and anger and suspicion were my first reactions to the world around me. Bert's voice boomed over the tape recorder. "Now I want you to look at this card, Charlie. What might this be? What do you see on this card? People see all kinds of things in these ink blots. Tell me what it makes you think of." The same words, almost the same tone of voice he had used minutes ago in the lab. And then I heard my answers. Childish, impossible things. And I dropped limply into the chair beside Professor Niemer's desk. Was that really me? I went back to the lab with Bert, and we went on with the Rorschach. We went through the cards slowly. This time my responses were different. I saw things in the ink blots. A pair of bats tugging at each other, 2 men fencing with swords. I imagined all sorts of things. But even so, I found myself not trusting Bert completely anymore. I kept turning the cards around, checking the backs to see if there was anything there I was supposed to catch. I peeked while he was making his notes, but it was all in code that looked like this: WF plus A, DDF-AD, ORIG period, WF-A, SF plus OBJ. The test still doesn't make sense. It seems to me that anyone could make up lies about things he didn't really see. How could they know I wasn't making fools of them by saying things I didn't really imagine? Maybe I'll understand it when Dr. Strauss lets me read up on psychology. It's getting harder for me to write down all my thoughts and feelings because I know that people are reading them. Maybe it would be better if I could keep some of these reports private for a while. I'm going to ask Dr. Strauss, why should it suddenly start to bother me? Progress Report 10. April 21st. I figured out a new way to set up the mixing machines in the bakery to speed up production. Mr. Donner says he will save labor costs and increase profits. He gave me a $50 bonus and a $10 a week raise. I wanted to take Joe Karp and Frank Riley out to lunch to celebrate, but Joe had to buy some things for his wife, and Frank was meeting his cousin for lunch. I guess it'll take time for them to get used to the changes in me. Everyone seems frightened of me. When I went over to Gimpy and tapped him on the shoulder to ask him something, he jumped up and dropped his cup of coffee all over himself. He stares at me when he thinks I'm not looking. Nobody at the place talks to me anymore, or kids around the way they used to. It makes the job kind of lonely. Thinking about it makes me remember the time I fell asleep standing up, and Frank kicked my legs out from under me. The warm, sweet smell, the white walls, the roar of the oven when Frank opens the door to shift the loaves. Suddenly falling, twisting, everything out from under me and my head cracking against the wall. It's me, and yet it's like someone else lying there, another Charlie. He's confused, rubbing his head, staring up at Frank, tall and thin, and then at Gimpy nearby, massive, hairy, gray-faced Gimpy with bushy eyebrows that almost hide his blue eyes. "Leave the kid alone," says Gimp. "Jesus, Frank, why do you always gotta pick on him?" "It don't mean nothing," laughs Frank. "It don't hurt him. He don't know any better. Do you, Charlie?" Charlie rubs his head and cringes. He doesn't know what he's done to deserve this punishment, but there's always the chance that there will be more. "But you know better," says Gimpy, clumping over on his orthopedic boot. "So what the hell are you always picking on him for?" The 2 men sit down at the long table, the tall Frank and the heavy Gimp shaping the dough for the rolls that have to be baked for the evening orders. They work in silence for a while, and then Frank stops and tips his white cap back. "Hey, Gimp, think Charlie could learn to bake rolls?" Gimp leans an elbow on the work table. "Why don't we just leave him alone?" "No, I mean it, Gimp, seriously. I bet he could learn something simple like making rolls." The idea seems to appeal to Gimpy, who turns to stare at Charlie. "Maybe you got something there. Hey, Charlie, come here a minute." As he usually does when people are talking about him, Charlie has been keeping his head down, staring at his shoelaces. He knows how to lace and tie them. He could make rolls. He could learn to pound, roll, twist, and shape the dough into the small round forms. Frank looks at him uncertainly. "Maybe we shouldn't, Gimp. Maybe it's wrong. If a moron can't learn, maybe we shouldn't start anything with him." "You leave this to me," says Gimpy, who has now taken over Frank's idea. "I think maybe he can learn. Now listen, Charlie. You want to learn something? You want me to teach you how to make rolls like me and Frank are doing?" Charlie stares at him, the smile melting from his face. He understands what Gimpy wants, and he feels cornered. He wants to please Gimpy, but there is something about the words learn and teach, something to remember about being punished severely, but he doesn't recall what it is, only a thin white hand upraised, hitting him to make him learn something he couldn't understand. Charlie backs away, but Gimpy grabs his arm. "Hey, kid, take it easy. We ain't gonna hurt you. Look at him shaking like he's gonna fall apart. Look, Charlie, I got a nice new shiny good luck piece for you to play with." He holds out his hand and reveals a brass chain with a shiny brass disc that says, "Stay Bright Metal Polish." He holds the chain by one end, and the gleaming gold disc rotates slowly, catching the light of the fluorescent bulbs. The pendant is a brightness that Charlie remembers, but he doesn't know why or what. He doesn't reach for it. He knows you get punished if you reach out for other people's things. If someone puts it into your hand, that's all right, but otherwise it's wrong. When he sees that Gimpy is offering it to him, he nods and smiles again. "That he knows," laughs Frank. "Give him something bright and shiny." Frank, who has let Gimpy take over the experiment, leans forward excitedly. "Maybe, if he wants that piece of junk bad enough, and you tell him he'll get it if he learns to shape the dough into rolls, maybe it'll work." As the bakers set to the task of teaching Charlie, others from the shop gather around. Frank clears an area between them on the table, and Gimpy pulls off a medium-sized piece of dough for Charlie to work with. There is talk of betting on whether or not Charlie can learn to make rolls. "Watch us carefully," says Gimpy, putting the pendant beside him on the table where Charlie can see it. "Watch and do everything we do. If you learn how to make rolls, you get this shiny good luck piece." Charlie hunches over on his stool, intently watching Gimpy pick up the knife and cut off a slab of dough. He studies each movement as Gimpy rolls out the dough into a long roll, breaks it off and twists it into a circle, pausing now and then to sprinkle it with flour. "Now watch me," says Frank, and he repeats Gimpy's performance. Charlie is confused. There are differences. Gimpy holds his elbows out as he rolls the dough, like a bird's wings, but Frank keeps his arms close to his sides. Gimpy keeps his thumbs together with the rest of his fingers as he kneads the dough, but Frank works with the flat of his palms, keeping thumbs apart from his other fingers and up in the air. Worrying about these things makes it impossible for Charlie to move when Gimpy says, "Go ahead, try it." Charlie shakes his head. "Look, Charlie, I'm going to do it again slow. Now you watch everything I do and do each part along with me, okay? But try to remember everything so then you'll be able to do the whole thing alone. Now come on, like this." Charlie frowns as he watches Gimpy pull off a section of dough and roll it into a ball. He hesitates, but then he picks up the knife and slices off a piece of dough and sets it down in the center of the table. Slowly, keeping his elbows out exactly as Gimpy does, he rolls it into a ball. He looks from his own hands to Gimpy's, and he's careful to keep his fingers exactly the same way, thumbs together with the rest of his fingers, slightly cupped. He has to do it right, the way Gimpy wants him to do it. There are echoes inside him that say, "Do it right, and they will like you." And he wants Gimpy and Frank to like him. When Gimpy has finished working his dough into a ball, he stands back, and so does Charlie. "Hey, that's great. Look, Frank, he made it into a ball." Frank nods and smiles. Charlie sighs, and his whole frame trembles as the tension builds. He is unaccustomed to this rare moment of success. "All right now," says Gimpy. "Now we make a roll." Awkwardly but carefully, Charlie follows Gimpy's every move. Occasionally, a twitch of his hand or arm mars what he's doing, but in a little while, he's able to twist off a section of the dough and fashion it into a roll. Working beside Gimpy, he makes 6 rolls, and sprinkling them with flour, he sets them carefully alongside Gimpy's in the large flour-covered tray. "All right, Charlie." Gimpy's face is serious. "Now let's see you do it by yourself. Remember all the things you did from the beginning. Now go ahead." Charlie stares at the huge slab of dough and at the knife that Gimpy has pushed into his hand. And once again, panic comes over him. What did he do first? How did he hold his hand? His fingers? Which way did he roll the ball? 1,000 confusing ideas burst into his mind at the same time, and he stands there, smiling. He wants to do it, to make Frank and Gimpy happy and have them like him, and to get the bright good luck piece that Gimpy has promised him. He turns the smooth, heavy piece of dough around and around on the table, but he cannot bring himself to start. He cannot cut into it because he knows he will fail, and he's afraid. "He forgot already," said Frank. "It don't stick." He wants it to stick. He frowns and tries to remember. First, you start to cut off a piece. Then you roll it out into a ball. But how does it get to be a roll like the ones in the tray? That's something else. Give him time and he'll remember. As soon as the fuzziness passes away, he'll remember. Just another few seconds and he'll have it. He wants to hold on to what he's learned for a little while. He wants it so much. "Okay, Charlie," sighs Gimpy, taking the cutter out of his hand. "That's all right, don't worry about it. It's not your work anyway." Another minute and he'll remember. If only they wouldn't rush him. Why does everything have to be in such a hurry? "Go ahead, Charlie. Go sit down and look at your comic book. We gotta get back to work." Charlie nods and smiles and pulls the comic book out of his back pocket. He smooths it out and puts it on his head as a make-believe hat. Frank laughs, and Gimpy finally smiles. "Go on, you big baby," snorts Gimpy. "Go sit down there until Mr. Donna wants you." Charlie smiles at him and goes back to the flour sacks in the corner near the mixing machines. He likes to lean back against them while he sits on the floor cross-legged and looks at the pictures in his comic book. As he starts to turn the pages, he feels like crying, but he doesn't know why. What is there to feel sad about? The fuzzy cloud comes and goes, and now he looks forward to the pleasure of the brightly colored pictures in the comic book that he has gone through 30, 40 times. He knows all of the figures in the comic. He has asked their names over and over again of almost everyone he meets, and he understands that the strange forms of letters and words in the white balloons above the figures means that they are saying something. Would he ever learn to read what was in the balloons? If they gave him enough time, if they didn't rush him or push him too fast, he would get it. But nobody has time. Charlie pulls his legs up and opens the comic book to the first page, where Batman and Robin are swinging up a long rope to the side of a building. Someday, he decides, he is going to read. And then he will be able to read the story. He feels a hand on his shoulder, and he looks up. It's Gimpy, holding out the brass disc and chain, letting it swing and twirl around so that it catches the light. "Here," he says gruffly, tossing it into Charlie's lap, and then he limps away. I never thought about it before, but that was a nice thing for him to do. Why did he? Anyway, that's my memory of the time, clearer and more complete than anything I have ever experienced before, like looking out of the kitchen window early when the morning light is still gray. I've come a long way since then, and I owe it all to Dr. Strauss and Professor Niemer and the other people here at Beekman. But what must Frank and Gimpy think and feel now, seeing how... April 22nd. People at the bakery are changing. Not only ignoring me, I can feel the hostility. Donna is arranging for me to join the bakers' union, and I've gotten another raise. The rotten thing is that all of the pleasure is gone because the others resent me. In a way, I can't blame them. They don't understand what has happened to me, and I can't tell them. People aren't proud of me the way I expected. Not at all. Still, I've got to have someone to talk to. I'm going to ask Miss Kinnian to go to a movie tomorrow night to celebrate my raise. If I can get up the nerve.